Today I'm going to be cooking two types of pizzas. I'm going to be cooking a seafood pizza and a chicken bacon ranch pizza. For both of these, I'm going to be using a white sauce instead of a traditional red sauce. And the white sauce I'm going to make is similar to a bechamel sauce, but I'm not going to use butter. I'm just going to use oil. I don't think on the pizzas it really makes too much difference whether you use oil or butter to make the sauce. And if you didn't want to make a homemade white sauce, you could certainly use something like Alfredo, but on the pizzas, I really prefer the white sauce. I'll make a traditional roux to make my white sauce, and I'm going to be using a half cup of flour, a half cup of oil, a little salt, and I have around 2 cups of milk that I'm going to use. I may not end up using all of it. It just depends on how thick or thin the sauce ends up. I'll also be using one of these flat whisks to make the roux. I found these work much better than something like a flat nose spoon. And a lot of times if you're making a dark roux, I find that parts of it can start to burn, but these flat whisks really do a good job of scraping the bottom of the pot and getting everything mixed up so it doesn't burn. And that's not so much of an issue today, but I really like these flat whisks for making all my roux. First, I'll add my oil. And next I'll add my flour. Next I'll just whisk everything together. And I know a lot of you already know how to make roux, but for this particular sauce I wanted to include the proportions that I use to make the white sauce. And it's rolling pretty good, so I better turn this down just a little bit. Sometimes I turn this hot plate up a little more than necessary, thinking that since it's smaller that it's not going to heat quite as good, but it really does heat pretty well. So I'm just going to keep stirring this until it almost looks kind of foamy. And it usually only takes a few minutes to get it like that. Okay, I've been stirring the roux for just a few minutes, and it's starting to change from a white to more of a tan color. So next I'm going to add in some of my milk, but I'm not going to add it all in just yet. I'm only going to add in about a cup or so. And I want to whisk that in really well. I'm going to turn my heat up just a little bit. And I want to whisk that milk in and get everything combined. And it's going to thicken up considerably, and then I'll add the rest of the milk. But I don't want to pour in all the milk at one time, because sometimes you may have a little more or a little less flour than normal, and you don't want your sauce to be too runny, especially if you're going to put it on something like pizza. I'm just going to keep stirring that around and get that roux mixed up with the milk. And if you're using one of these flat whisks, you are going to get some clumps inside the bottom of it. It's not a big deal. You can just shake those out. You can see it's gotten thicker and thicker, and I'm just going to try to work most of those lumps out. I'm going to put just a little bit more milk in, and I'm going to put a little bit of salt. All right, let me stir that milk in. Okay, I think this is the consistency that I want it to be. It's thick, but it's not too thick. I can still spread it on the pizza. So I'm going to take it off of the heat. Next, I want to divide up the white sauce between 2 containers. And I'm not going to use all of the white sauce for either pizza, so it doesn't have to be exact. For my seafood pizza, I'm going to put about 1.5 tablespoons of Old Bay right into the white sauce. And for my chicken bacon ranch pizza, I'm going to put 5 tablespoons of ranch powder. Next, I'll mix these up. I'm going to make my seafood pizza first, and to do that I'm using 8 ounces of small deveined shrimp and 8 ounces of imitation crab meat. Now, I've had seafood pizza a few times in the past, and I've never found one that used real crab meat, so I suppose you could do that. But for my pizza, I'm keeping it pretty simple. I'm going to put in about 1 tablespoon of butter. I don't want to use too much butter because I don't want the toppings to be too greasy. But I do need some type of oil down to saute the shrimp. And I am going to be cooking the shrimp ahead of time. I know some people may not think that that's necessary, but I've worked at a couple pizza places in the past. We always pre-cook any meats that we used on our pizzas, so I think it's just a good idea. Let me stir these around a little bit. I've been cooking my shrimp for a couple minutes and they're almost done. So next I'm going to pour in my crab meat, which does not really need to be cooked, but I want to get some seasoning on this and have it all mixed together. I'll add a little bit more Old Bay. This is about another tablespoon. And just get that mixed in and stirred. Okay, the shrimp and crab are done. So I'm going to remove this from the heat and give it a few minutes to cool down, and then I'll get started on the pizza. For my pizza crust, I'm going to be using some of these pre-made crusts. I actually have a video somewhere on my channel where I show how to make homemade pizza crusts, and they're really good, but just for the sake of time and being a little bit easier, I am going to use some of these store-bought ones. Okay, I've got my pizza crust on my Pampered Chef cooking stone, and I really love this cooking stone. I actually had an off-brand, I don't remember what it was, but it was like a $14 off-brand cooking stone, and it did not do near as good as the genuine Pampered Chef one. So if you do a lot of baking, even cookies, you could just about anything you can cook on these Pampered Chef cooking stones, it comes out really good. First, I'll put my white sauce on my pizza crust. I'm going to add some mozzarella. And again, you can add whatever kind of cheese you want. And if I had some other types of white cheeses, I would probably add them also. But I have a big bag of mozzarella to use, so both of these pizzas that I'm making today are going to get mozzarella. Next, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of basil onto the pizza. I don't want too much, but I do think basil goes pretty good even with the seafood pizzas. And finally, I'll put on my shrimp and crab topping. And even though it's going to make my hands messy, I find it a little bit easier to distribute it just by using my hands. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to bake these in the oven at 450 degrees for about 6 to 8 minutes. Basically until the cheese is melted. The seafood pizza is out of the oven and it's looking pretty good. Now this was the first time that I used this brand of crust. This is the Mama Mary's. And it really only got dark on part of it, and I don't know, it may be okay, but I actually like to use these Mia brand crusts, but I only had one from a pizza that I cooked a few days ago, so I bought a 2-pack of these Mama Mary's, and I'm not sure if this crust is going to be quite as good. It doesn't look quite as good, but of course it may taste fine. But I think for the second pizza I'm going to use this Mia's crust because I know that I like those. But overall, the pizza looks pretty good, and I've made this before, so I know that it's going to taste good, and hopefully there's no issues with this crust. So let's get started on the second pizza. For the chicken bacon ranch pizza, I have my different style pizza crust. I have my white sauce that I put the ranch powder in. I've got bacon bits, tomatoes, which is just a can of Rotel that I opened, and I'll be using pre-cooked chicken breast. I'm going to drain the can and probably use just about the whole thing because one of these cans drained is about 7 ounces, which is a good amount for these pizzas. And if you decide to make this pizza and you think there's not enough ranch flavor in the white sauce, you can always add more. Or if you think it's too ranchy or anything like that, you can leave a little bit out. Next, I'll put my chicken. Just going to spread that around, try to get it nice and even. And I'm going to leave these chunks somewhat intact unless they're too big. Next, I'll add my bacon. And finally, my tomatoes. For this pizza, I'm going to put a little bit of the mozzarella cheese on here, not quite as much as the last one, because I don't want this pizza to be too cheesy. Certainly, if you like it super cheesy, you can add as much cheese as you would like. Okay, this one's going to go into the oven also at 450 degrees for about 6 to 8 minutes. The chicken bacon ranch pizza is now done, and here's a look at both of the pizzas that I cooked today. Both of these are pizzas that I've cooked before, and they're really good. And it's a little bit different variation on your typical pepperoni or sausage pizza. I like using the white sauce as an alternative, and just something a little bit different. So that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. As always, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next video.